All right, let's talk about a story that is just wild. It's a story of unchecked ambition, massive deception, and the spectacular collapse of a Silicon Valley superstar. Today, we're unpacking the cautionary tale of Theranos. So, it all kicked off with this one simple, world-changing promise. I mean, just think about it for a second. No more big, scary needles, no more giving vials and vials of blood, just a tiny, painless little prick of your finger. And boom, you unlock a whole universe of health data. That was the pitch. And let me tell you, it captivated everyone, from presidents to billionaires to, well, the entire world. So who was the mind behind this incredible vision? Well, it was Elizabeth Holmes. She was just 19 years old when she dropped out of Stanford. And the story goes she was absolutely terrified of needles. So her motivation, at least on the surface, seemed really personal, right? A desire to completely democratize healthcare, to catch diseases early, all supposedly inspired by losing a loved one. So in 2003, she founded Theranos. And the name itself, I mean, it's pretty brilliant marketing when you think about it. It's a mix of therapy and diagnosis. It just perfectly captured that powerful, simple mission. Now, to sell this vision, Holmes knew she had to build this larger-than-life persona. It wasn't just about the idea, it was all about the image. She became absolutely obsessed with modeling herself after Steve Jobs. I mean, right down to the signature black turtleneck. She even, and this is wild, faked a deep voice and practiced this intense, unblinking stare that people found both mesmerizing and, frankly, deeply unsettling. She wasn't just selling a product, she was selling the idea of a genius. And you know what? That whole persona, it worked. It worked brilliantly. It really became the key to building this huge illusion of success, an illusion that would end up attracting some of the most powerful people and, you guessed it, the biggest wallets on the entire planet. Okay, just look at her board of directors. It was a literal who's who of American political and military power. We're talking Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, General James Mattis. But notice who's missing. Yeah, anyone with any actual expertise in biotechnology or medicine. These were powerful, influential men completely charmed by a compelling story, not by any actual science. So with that kind of political firepower behind you, what happens next? The investment capital just flooded in. I'm not talking small checks here. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars from the world's most famous families and investors. The momentum felt absolutely unstoppable. And all that momentum, all that hype, it led to this number: $9 billion. That's with a B. At its absolute peak, that was the valuation of Theranos. It made Elizabeth Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in history. She was on the cover of every major business magazine, being hailed as the next Steve Jobs. But you knew there was a but coming. Behind all those glossy magazine covers, behind that powerful board, and behind the billions and billions of dollars, there was a catastrophic secret. The entire empire was built on a complete and total lie. So what was really going on inside those labs at Theranos? Well, the truth was so much darker than anyone on the outside could have possibly imagined. Okay, this right here, this is the heart of the fraud. The whole promise was this little box, the Edison, this revolutionary miniaturized device. But the reality? Oh, they were secretly just using standard off-the-shelf blood testing machines from Siemens. They promised over 200 tests from a single drop of blood, but their machine, it could barely run a dozen tests, and even those were totally unreliable. And to try and make it work, they were even diluting the tiny blood samples, which just made the results wildly, dangerously inaccurate. So how on earth did they keep a secret this massive? Well, they ruled with an iron fist. Holmes and her boyfriend, who was also the company's COO, Sunny Balwani, they created this internal culture of extreme secrecy and just fear. They monitored emails, they tracked employees' movements, and they used these terrifyingly broad non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs. And the departments were kept completely separate, siloed, so that no single person could ever see the full picture of the fraud. But look, this wasn't just about scamming investors out of their money. This deception had devastating, real-world consequences for the people, the actual patients who trusted Theranos with their health. I mean, listen to this. One woman got the absolutely heartbreaking news that she was having a miscarriage, all based on a faulty Theranos test. But she wasn't. She was actually carrying a perfectly healthy pregnancy. But she only found that out after going through unimaginable and completely unnecessary grief.
Or how about this one? A man was told he was HIV positive. He spent weeks in total anguish. His entire life turned completely upside down by a false result. You have to understand, doctors were making life or death decisions based on what was essentially just garbage data.
But even in a culture built on fear, sometimes people find the courage to speak up. And the truth finally started to leak out, all thanks to a few incredibly brave whistleblowers and one very tenacious reporter. The cult of personality around Elizabeth Holmes was just so strong, it literally tore families apart. Take Tyler Schultz. He was a young employee there who figured out the fraud, and he went to his own grandfather, George Schultz, who was on the board of directors. But his grandfather, he sided with the charismatic founder, not his own flesh and blood. He actually stood by as Theranos' lawyers tried to intimidate his own grandson into silence. But Tyler Schultz and another brave whistleblower named Erica Chung, they didn't back down. They went to a Wall Street Journal reporter, John Carreyrou. And on October 15, 2015, Carreyrou published his very first story, and the cracks in that perfect facade just burst wide open for the whole world to see. And once that article hit the front page, the downfall was just breathtakingly swift. The entire $9 billion house of cards came crashing down. I mean, the financial collapse was total. Just think about this. In 2014, Forbes had valued Holmes' personal stake in the company at $4.5 billion. Just 2 years later, they revised that estimate down to zero. The wealth was a complete illusion, and it just evaporated into thin air. And then came the legal reckoning, and it was just as swift. First, regulators stormed in and found an immediate jeopardy to patient health. Then, the big partners like Walgreens sued. And finally, the federal indictments came down. In the end, both Holmes and Balwani were convicted of fraud and sentenced to over a decade each in federal prison. So, in the end, after all the hype, all the money, and all the terrible harm it caused, that revolutionary device that was supposed to change the world, it was revealed for what it truly was, a box that did absolutely nothing. And all of this really leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? The classic Silicon Valley mantra of fake it till you make it. Well, it might work for a social media app, but when that idea gets applied to people's health, the story of Theranos shows us exactly who pays the devastating price.